Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from at AKwx TV to at NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Hello again and welcome to this Sunday show. Up first, hazardous weather graphics. Actually, you could call them the no hazardous weather graphics. No watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere around the state for today, tomorrow, probably the next several days, hopefully. And going to the last issuance of the breakup map here. Actually, yesterday, didn't get an update today. But you can see all the rivers here south of the Brooks Range, including the noaa here, all of them open now, and mostly open on the North Slope rivers as well, with the Colville showing the biggest area of just open water there. So, in the 2023 spring breakup period, hopefully an easy summer coming up. And for the satellite imagery, starting in the Panhandle here, pretty good upper level low down in here over British Columbia, still close enough to definitely bring some pretty good moisture into the southeast coast here, with the heaviest amount central and southern areas, and lighter up to the north and break out into some sunshine there. North Gulf Coast, Northway into the Copper River Basin today, and parts of the eastern interior. Still enough clouds around that nobody broke 70 degrees, at least that I saw in the observations as of 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon, but still well into the 60s there. And then kind of a cold front still right through here, a boundary between the chillier air back to the northwest and north, and the milder 50s and 60s to the east and southeast, and some showers along that band as well. And then clouds here coming northward, as you can see, kind of a sunny break came in across Cook Inlet today, but some more clouds down to the south there into the southern Kenai Peninsula, with some rain picking up, Kamishak Bay, some areas of rain, Kodiak Island, but heaviest here on the Pacific side of the eastern Alaska Peninsula, and then kind of scatters out to the west. Break here over the Bering Sea, not much going on there. And then this front pushing eastward, bringing some gusty winds up to about 35 miles an hour to the central Aleutians, along with some light rain, and then the main low hanging back to the west there. You can see that front pushing mostly to the east here. This portion sort of rotating back to the northwest, and very slow-moving low there coming in from the Komodorsky area. Otherwise, Arctic low now pulling off to the east-northeast there. Finally, is going to exit the North Slope Arctic coast areas. That should allow these areas to warm up over the next few days from what they've been stuck in the 20s and 30s there, even for the daytime highs. So look for some finally warmer conditions to, or at least winter should break up in these areas here over the next couple of days. Already starting to show that today. Winds lightening up, but still some light snow along the Arctic coast and areas. And then right through here where that boundary is, some showers. Amounts in the last 12 hours generally less than 1/10 of an inch, anywhere from just 1/100 of an inch to maybe 900ths in some areas, all the way up to the eastern Brooks Range. And Anatuvik had some light snow earlier. And winds coming down on the Arctic coast, where they had gusted earlier today, 25 to 35 miles an hour. And Copper River Basin seeing fair amount of sunshine, as well as Cook Inlet today. Northern Cook Inlet especially, up into the valleys. And some showers here lingering along the southwest coast, mainly through this area here. And the heaviest precipitation is right up through this area there. And then over the southeast coast, heaviest showers over the southern panhandle. In fact, the last 12 hours, AKwx picked up nearly an inch of rain. And Ketchikan and Petersburg got about 3/4 of an inch, while Cake had about just under half an inch, and then it cuts off there and just dry with clouds up to the north with isolated showers. Light rain Kodiak Island due to the southeast flow coming up around the ridge that's ridged up into the Gulf of Alaska, and that kind of feeding some moisture into this area here, but all light, and a break here over the eastern Bering Sea, central areas as well, and then that front spreading the rain in across the central Aleutians. Tonight, that front really weakens, losing the even the small craft advisory level winds. So some light rain may spread into Nunivak Island, but don't look for much of an increase in the wind there. It'll stay gale force winds with this 976 millibar low sitting between the Komodorskis and Shemya. So it'll stay windy and wet out there. Not much going on over the Bering Sea, a lot of clouds, southeast winds 10 to 20 miles an hour. Rain, though, with the Alaska Peninsula with this low down to the south. It's slowly lifting northward, so that's going to spread more rain up to Kodiak Island into southern Cook Inlet, and increasing chances for some light rain, Togiak Bay, Bristol Bay as well. Otherwise dry interior Alaska with some pretty good clearing continuing North Gulf Coast, eastern Copper River Basin, all the way up to the eastern Brooks Range. Look for some clearing now. And clouds should increase here over Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula area later tonight as some of this moisture starts to work northward. Showers hanging on to the east side of the Panhandle and down to the south, but probably not as heavy as they have been, as that low taking its time pulling out of the area. Still tomorrow, that upper level system close enough that's going to keep a chance of showers and clouds over the southern Panhandle. Isolated scattered showers, central southeast coast, otherwise over to the border and into Canada will be most of the moisture. You can see it's starting to edge back to the west here, but still staying east of Alaska, but getting a little closer in from the west. Otherwise, mostly sunny skies, highs in the 70s, eastern, central, interior, even the Copper River Basin. Rain, Kodiak Island. Low brings rain into Bristol Bay. Showers for the Alaska Peninsula, and chance of showers for the eastern Aleutians, with a much weakened frontal boundary now in between the Pribilofs and the central Aleutians, so could see a little bit of clearing there, Adak and Atka. Also over the northern Bering Sea. More clearing, light winds, or more sunshine for the north slope and the Arctic coast. Next system, or actually the old system here, hanging out over the southwest Bering and slowly weakening, and then kind of shifts southward there. A new center forms a little farther to the east with another front. So that's going to spread some rain into the Pribilofs on Tuesday, bring some more rain into the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula as well. Showers for the Aleutian Range. Isolated showers possible, mostly cloudy skies along the southwest coast, inland over the Togiak Bay area, up across the Yukon Delta, and still even showers over the Alaska Peninsula. Chance of rain, Kodiak Island with this trough here, and again, continued light southeast flow, and a ridge right up along the coastline, so look for those afternoon gusty southeast winds through Turnagain Arm and blowing out across to Tyonek there, with the afternoon heating in the Susitna Valley areas, actually all heating all in the interior. Highs again in the 70s, warmest here on the east side. Still cooler back to the west. Some fog possible there for the central western Arctic coast. Dry for the southeast coast, all that moisture now up to the north here and staying east of the border. So moving on to the lows for tonight, 40s for the Panhandle, 40s everywhere else, coolest in the Copper River Basin as it usually is. And highs tomorrow, mid-70s there for the Copper River Basin, and 65 to 72. So sitting in Manuska Valley all the way down into the Wasilla-Palmer area. 60, 65 Kenai Peninsula, 50 for Kodiak, in the 50s for the Panhandle. Lows in the 40s, followed by highs. A little cooler now for the Copper River Basin. Highs on Tuesday expected in the mid-60s. Cooler here as well with that moisture coming up and the clouds for south central Alaska. So upper 50s and 60s, upper 40s for Kodiak Island. Warmer though over the southern, all of the Panhandle now, 60 to 65. Up in the interior, lows tonight, mild in the mid-40s for the Tanana Valley. Still a little chilly, below freezing from the Brooks Range of the Arctic coast. Followed by highs, 70s, upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, Chalkitsik, all the way down to Northway and Tok. lows in the 50s now, getting more summer-like here over the eastern interior, and lower 30s for the Arctic.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, Monday morning showing a lot of IFR out here over the Bering Sea, but staying off the coast here. And VFR, Arctic coast, North Slope, all the way down to the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. A little bit of IFR here over the Kilberg Mountains there, just north of Togiak. Good VFR into the Gulf of Alaska and into the Panhandle. That upper level system here over British Columbia, keeping lower conditions with some showers, resulting in some IFR over toward the eastern border, especially down toward Misty Fjords, Hyder, Stewart. Then some IFR slipping into south coast of Prince of Wales Island. That stretches all the way back across the Pacific there to Kodiak Island, up into Kamishak Bay, and south and along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs, IFR. And for Monday afternoon, VFR, Arctic Ocean, across the Brooks Range, all of interior Alaska, looking good tomorrow afternoon, all the way down even Prince William Sound, the North Gulf Coast. Still lower conditions as you get down into Kachemak, Kamishak Bay, and Barren Islands right into the IFR there, east side of Kodiak, and then back up to the Alaska Peninsula. Eastern Aleutians, a little bit IFR. Some improvement over the Panhandle, but again, that system in British Columbia keeping the lower conditions in over toward the southern eastern border areas there. And a little bit of IFR here along and just south of the western Aleutians. Still a pretty good slug IFR over the central northern Bering Sea. That pretty much holds, kind of meanders around out here, expands a little, contracts in some areas, and drifts eastward, now covering all the eastern Aleutians there, right up to about Cape Newenham. And Gamble, St. Lawrence Island, could see some IFR. Otherwise, the interior looking good. Chukchi Sea, Arctic Ocean, North Slope, good VFR there, which hopefully translates to a fair amount of sunshine. And marginal VFR for the southeast coast. IFR now up into western Prince William Sound, possibly, and in across again the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, east side of Kodiak. And for Tuesday afternoon, good VFR again in the interior. Some moisture coming up, southeast flow, kind of an easterly wave side kind of thing here, pulling some IFR, keeping it up into the Prince William Sound area, pushing it up into Yakutat, possibly, but improving here over the Panhandle, although marginal VFR up around Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, but that area to the south becoming VFR, and passes Manituvik, VFR. For Monday. In fact, Brooks Range looking good all the way across VFR for Adigan. Same thing for the Alaska Range, Lake Clark, Merrill, and Rainy. Good VFR for the day Monday. Same thing for Windy, wide open there. And Isabel, VFR. Mintesta, VFR. And Tanita also looking good, VFR there. In fact, all of the Susitna Manuska Valley will be VFR. Portage, same thing, VFR flying either approach, turning an arm out through Passage Canal into the Sound. Good VFR. Chilcoot and White, same thing, VFR. Freezing levels, again, cooler air here with that upper level system over British Columbia. That's what's keeping the lower flying conditions, showers in over the Panhandle. About 6,000 to 8,000 feet here over the east and south central Alaska. To Kodiak Island, back down to about 4,000 feet here over the Bering Sea along the southwest coast. And icing, again, that system here in British Columbia keeps the threat of some mixed icing over the eastern part of the southeast coast. And then the moisture here across Kodiak Island up into Bristol Bay and Togiak Bay, actually into the Kuskokwim Delta. Could be some isolated moderate rime icing there. And then another threat out here out over the west central Aleutians. And moving to the jet stream, upper level low here, again, southeast flow, pulling that moisture up 65 knots into Togiak Bay there, Bristol Bay. High pressure ridge through the central interior, light westerly flow along the Arctic coast, 9,000 feet, southeast 55 knots there into the Aleutian Range, Kamishak Bay area, and then westerlies along and south of the Aleutians. 3,000 feet, pretty light winds at this elevation over the Panhandle, southeast 55 knots into the southwest interior. So turbulence-wise, looking at considerable moderate turbulence, Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay, maybe to Iliamna Lake, light to isolated and moderate over much of southwest Alaska and over the western and central Aleutian.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us here today is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, GINA for short. And Eric, you frequently come on the show to tell us about these really cool things that we're doing with satellites over Alaska and how we can use these really awesome tools. But I'm thinking all the while there has to be a mad scientist somewhere working on the next cool thing in the satellite laboratory. What is being developed today?
Right. Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the boonies in North Dakota there, on Sunday after church, the old people, like my parents and their parents, would gather and have coffee and talk. And I kind of eavesdropped on them a little bit. And the theme of a lot of these conversations seemed to be, well, isn't it amazing what they can do these days, someone would say.
Sure.
And I was thinking, oh, I don't know, I was too young.
Right.
Well, now I'm old enough in the weather satellite business.
You can remember when.
The new generation of weather satellites, I'm starting to say, isn't it amazing what they can do these days? Because it's always improving.
Yes.
Maybe an analogy here is like television. Television started in black and white, then it went to color. Analog signal transitioned to digital here a number of years ago. Standard definition becomes high definition. Right. Well, weather satellites are changing too. First weather satellites went up around 1960, not that long ago. No. It's comparatively young science. And every time a new series of satellite is launched, we learn from the past, so the mad scientists decide, well, we could make the next satellite even better in such and such a respect. Yes. And now the United States is on the verge of launching, or in progress of launching, a series of new geostationary satellites that are better than ever before. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the previews of what these new satellites can do.
Peek inside the lab here, okay.
Yeah, and so we'll peek in, and here are some mad scientists and mad technicians dressed in bunny suits. This is, believe it or not, this is the business end of a weather satellite under construction in a clean room. You don't want a speck of dust on the lens of a weather satellite's camera. So this is done in a clean environment. They are building a geostationary satellite there.
Oh, cool.
This new generation of satellites, if you had to answer the question, why are these better? Why do we care? Okay. You could answer it with 3 words: faster, better, more. The new generation of satellites are faster than the older ones. The images are sharper, they're better, and there's more spectral channels. We'll talk about that.
Any one of these called Steve Austin sounds faster, better, stronger.
Yeah. You know what, though? These things cost more than $6 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're pricey, but they are an essential tool for the Weather Service to fulfill its mission of protecting lives and property.
Exactly.
You got to have the tool to do the job, and it helps all of us when we get the accurate forecast, the warning in time, and this is the tool. Faster. On left here, we see what the old generation of satellites could scan in 5 minutes. On the right, that's what you get in 5 minutes, the whole planet, or at least one side of it. So it's faster. That means you can take more images over a given amount of time and make smoother movie loops out of that. Because animating movie loops really helps you highlight a feature that maybe you can't see as well in a single image.
Absolutely does, yep.
Let's zoom into a small piece of real estate like Texas.
Sure.
And we can see here a satellite that has a 1-minute movie loop visible light. You can see thunderstorms boiling there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, the rippling of the top of the thunderstorm. This is a fun movie loop. We're going to be able to see things like this more and more often because of the new satellites being generated. Some things are only evident in animation. So that's faster. Well, what's better? We're able to now have sharper imagery than before. The Japanese have a satellite that uses the same imager that is on the new generation of satellites that America is launching too. An imager, that's just a word for camera. It's the camera on a weather satellite. We have something called the Advanced Baseline Imager.
Sounds important.
ABI. It's important enough it has an acronym. Everything's an acronym. Well, an ABI-like instrument is here over the Western Pacific, and we can see this color image. This is what a human eye might see if you were riding on the satellite.
Okay.
But it's a little bit fuzzy. With new technology, you can post-process the image taken by the satellite to highlight and sharpen some of the features. So this image here of the Western Pacific then becomes this image. Thanks to the processing techniques, yes, this is the newest technology. So we've got a new satellite that can provide better data than ever before. And on the ground, we can process it better than before as well to really sharpen up the imagery and to give us a better view of the weather than ever before. So faster and better and more. What do we mean by more? Well, on the older generation of satellites, the imager, the camera, had 5 slices of the spectral pie, visible imagery, infrared imagery, something we can't see from the human eye. A lot of different slices of the pie. We're going from 5. The new imager has 16 slices. Each slice has its own relevance. Some are best for volcanic ash, for smoke, for dust, for telling the difference between smoke and dust, which can look similar under some infrared channels, but other ones bring out certain things. All of these 16 bands are important. In fact, some of the mad scientists, they didn't want 16, they wanted 24. There's always more you can do. But that'll be the next generation of satellites. So now we say, isn't it amazing what we can do these days? And you know what? It makes you think, well, what's the future going to be like too? It's so important to be able to know what's going on now in the weather. If you're going to forecast the future, you got to know where things are now. And satellites are the way to see that, especially in Alaska, where we don't have as many observations down on the ground. The satellites fill in the holes.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I love hearing about what we can see right now, but I love thinking about what is possible in the future. It's amazing stuff. And since you paid for it, it's a good time to learn about it. If you'd like, check out the website at www.goes-r.gov. And as I understand, it's a really easy website to use.
Oh yeah, a lot of good information about what these new satellites mean to Americans. And it's the Weather Service's mission to protect lives and property, and this is the tool how to do it.
Cool stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for joining us right here in Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal water forecast for Monday. Southwest winds 15 knots on the south coast, east-southeast 20 to 25 knots here on the north coast, or on the central north coast, and then the extreme north coast up there. Lighter winds again out of the west, 10 to 15 knots. And Lake Canal, a little breezy over the inside waters here, central northern areas. South 20, gusts 35 knots, south 35 knots. So gale warnings for Clarence Strait, or I'm sorry, gale warnings for Stevens Passage for 35 knot south winds. Clarence Strait just 15 out of the southeast. And then on Tuesday, light variable winds, 10 knots about sums it up for the inner channels and inside waters of the southeast coast, with seas pretty slight on average, 2 feet, give or take. South to southeast wind, 10 to 15 knots on the south coast with seas 7 to 8 feet. Central coast, southeast 15 to 20. And the north coast up here, east winds 20 to 25 knots with seas 10 to 12 feet. Prince William Sound, light variable winds tomorrow. And seas pretty slight, 2 feet or less, and 10-knot variable winds there for eastern North Gulf Coast, Middleton Island area, northeast 25, though, for the western North Gulf Coast. Then gale warnings in the forecast now for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, for east winds at 35 knots, seas around 10 feet. Cook Inlet, northeast breeze at 15 knots with 3-foot seas. And for Tuesday, Cook Inlet, northeast winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Easterlies, 30 knots there, still pretty brisk for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, right out of the east at 30, seas about 8 to 9 feet. And wet east at 20 for the western North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, eastern coast here. East at 25, Prince William Sound, northeast at 20 with 4-foot seas. Kodiak Island for Monday, east-northeast, 30 knots, seas 8 feet. And Alaska Peninsula here, West end, variable winds at 10, otherwise east-northeast 20 to 25 knots, Bristol Bay east winds 25 knots. And for the Alaska Peninsula on Tuesday, those light variable winds of the western areas tomorrow advance eastward. So let's call it light and variable for the Alaska Peninsula. And east to 20 for Bristol Bay. Small craft advisories, Kodiak Island for east to southeast at 25 to 30 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, generally south to southeast winds at 15 to 20 knots. And west 25 knot winds for Adak and Atka. And then winds pick up to gale force there, Kisk Island to Shimia from the southwest, sustained at 35 knots. And for Tuesday, lighter winds out west there, west-southwest 20 to 25 knots, Adak and Atka, southwest 25 knots, and the eastern Aleutians, southwest 15 to 20 knots. And for the southwest coast, strongest winds will be south of Nunivak Island tomorrow, out of the east at 25 knots, and that blows right across the Bering Sea there. St. Matthew Island, same thing, east at 25, east 20 for the Pribilofs. Yukon Delta coast, east at 15, St. Lawrence Island, east at 15, and Norton Sound, east at 20 with 4-foot seas. And for Tuesday, Norton Sound, east winds 15 knots, and for St. Lawrence Island, east at 20, east 20 also for the southwest coast here, 3 to 4 foot seas. North 25 there for St. Matthew Island with 9-foot seas. Light variable wind conditions for St. Paul and St. George Island, seas up around 7 feet. Southeast at 10 to 15 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow. Central coast and the west side, south at 15 knots. And a little more variable, mostly on average out of the east 10 to 15 for the Chukchi Sea. And for Tuesday, here for the Chukchi Sea, northeast 10 to 20 knots, western Arctic coast, northeast at 15. Same thing for the central coast, east-northeast 15 knots for the eastern coast. And for tonight, winds will continue to diminish there along the Arctic coast and the North Slope, what they were earlier today. And looks like it'll dry out, too. Much interior Alaska. Chance of rain maybe up into Kamishak Bay, southern Cook Inlet. Heaviest so for Kodiak Island. A little more southeast flow there with that front. This front out here really weakening as it pushes into Adak and Atka. Some rain spreading into Unmak Island late. Much windier and showery out over the western Aleutians. For tomorrow, sunny over the interior. Still a chance of showers in the Panhandle. The next day, sunny and warm, interior Alaska to the Arctic coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.